Hi everyone, I'm Kim Knox, President of the League of Women Voters of San Diego. It's so nice to see you all here today, and I want to thank you for bringing your vaccination cards or test results and for wearing your masks during this event. We'll be taking ours off just when we're talking up here. Now I'll turn it over to Jane Andrews, our program chair, to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you, Kim. Buenos dias y bienvenido. Good morning and welcome. It's really so exciting to see you all in person. I've been really dreaming about this day for a long time, got a little choked up. And we are particularly pleased to be having this particular program during Latinx Heritage Month here in San Diego. So I wanted to say two things. One is we will have a question and answer period after the speakers, and it's a league practice to have index cards where people write questions, and Kim Knox, our president, will, and some of our other team will be passing those around, and then we'll ask them here from the podium. The other thing is normally we would offer food. Normally this is a lunch event, but with COVID and all, I'm afraid not, but there are some nearby options, Starbucks, if you're ravenous by 1 o'clock. So the other thing before I introduce our speakers is I do want to say a brief story about how this event came to pass. 2 years ago at a league lunch, I sat next to two very engaging, intelligent women who have since become dear friends. Cecilia Cazares and Becky Alvarez Mandaca over there, and Cecilia's husband, Jose Cano. And they are the ones who introduced me to our two speakers who have so kindly agreed to be here. So I think that shows the value of the connections that we can make through the League, finding interesting people. So let me speak of our speakers. Maria Garcia is the author of a wonderful new book about the history of the Latino community in San Diego, which tells the stories of so many important people, their challenges, their successes. And then she also wrote another book a few years ago called La Neighbor, about the role in the Latino community of the neighborhood house in Barrio Logan. And she's received several awards for that book. Maria was a teacher, a vice principal, and then principal at elementary schools in San Diego for many, many years. She's also served on the board and worked extensively for the Chicano Federation, really since its founding in 1969. She's a keen observer and historian of the Latino community, and we are honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Nancy Maldonado is currently the president and the CEO of the Chicano Federation of San Diego County. She's a community advocate with a strong commitment to under-resourced communities. She also serves as an elected member of Unidos US and is an appointed member of Mayor Gloria's Latinx Advisory Group. Again, we are honored to have you here.
Thank you.
So, Maria. Over to you.
It's Kim first, isn't it?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I thought I was asked to speak about myself, and I have to be very honest, I'm not comfortable talking about myself. I prefer to talk about the book. So I'm going to give you a real quick little story about me. I was born in Yuma, Arizona, and brought to San Diego at the age of 3. So I consider myself a San Diegan. By the time I had reached 5th grade, I had attended 6 elementary schools. So that tells you we moved a lot. My first experience with racism was with the nuns at St. Jude's. I had the love for my parents, my aunts and uncles. It never dawned on me that there was anything wrong with me. But of course, the nuns were more than willing to tell me what was wrong with me. And part of it was I was very shy and an introvert. I know those who know me now cannot believe that I was ever very shy, but I really was. On my mom's side of the family, I'm 3rd generation, and on my dad's side of the family, I'm 8th generation. My dad's family came to San Antonio on land grants from the Canary Islands. So that's basically, we were poor, but we always had food on the table. as I said, I didn't really know there was something wrong with me till I went to Catholic school. The first thing they did was change my name from Maria Elena to Mary Helen, and I didn't take that name back till I got to college. Okay. And by the way, that's a story I heard over and over again of people who had their name changed. The second thing they did was they called my mother and asked her if we could afford bread. We could afford bread, but I preferred tortillas. My mother would make tortillas regularly. Now, given a choice between old white bread and tortillas, which one would you really take, okay? And even bologna in the tortilla, but it was always the tortilla. So my mother said, yeah, but I didn't want the bread. And she said, well, the kids are making fun of her. To be very honest with you, I never had one of my fellow classmates make fun of me. I think it was the nuns that were very uncomfortable with it. And so I would have lunch under the ramp at St. Jude's by myself, so they couldn't tell me anything, okay? Today, that part of my life is still very painful, and I still feel some tremendous hate for those women. I know all about letting it go. You know, I have all those. I can give you all the right words, okay? I don't want to let it go. I don't want to forget how they treated me, okay? In high school, I had a 3.8 grade average, but no one ever told me about going to college, or even that there were scholarships. So I just assumed we couldn't afford it, so I went to work. Then a friend of mine discovered City College and suggested that we could go to City College and it would be reasonable. So I tried it. It was very reasonable. And by the way, this is when people had City College and not community colleges. That's what it was called. It was located downtown, is located downtown. My favorite class was political science, which probably does not come as a shock to anybody. And the instructor was Larry Schultz. And Jim Bear, who was an assemblyman at the time, selected a group of students from the various community colleges to go to Sacramento to see how the assembly was run. Well, we went to Sacramento, and it was, to me, I was in heaven. There was only 2 students from every school, and I was watching and talking, and it was the same day the Black Panthers stormed the assembly with the right to bear arms. So that was something more than a little exciting. And they were, they came in with the guns up, the bandaleros, and it was really something to see. And probably there was 15 to 20 of them, but to be honest with you, to me, it was a room this big full of people, okay? But I also found it very interesting to see the reaction between the assembly people and the Black Panthers. You didn't hear them yelling for law and order or anything. They sat there very quietly and watched and heard what was saying. In 1969, I transferred to San Diego State, which is now San Diego State University, and that's when I became involved with the Chicano movement. And to me, the Chicano movement was not only fighting for a cause, but it was fun. It was fun to go to a picket line with your friends. It was fun to demand something, and it was a different role for all of us. I don't think any of us ever knew what the results would be. We picketed in National City, we picketed Safeway in Pacific Beach, we were here, there at the church, we picketed the church, and we kept asking for equality, just to be recognized, okay? So I prefer not to use the term Hispanic, not only because it's a term left over from the Nixon administration, but also because I'm not his anything, okay? I went on a trip to Delano, and I was very excited. And I don't remember the reason why I had to come back before everybody, because a lot of my friends drove up. So I went on a bus. Now let me tell you who the bus was driven by. At the time, I didn't find this out till a few years ago. The bus driver was Carlos Legrete, and it was an old Marine bus that heated up about every half hour, and we had to stop. That trip to Delano took forever. When I got there, they were having speeches, and the first mass where you received tortilla communion. I had never received tortilla communion, and Father Saldini passed it out, and I was so intaken. I did meet Cesar, but at that time, remember, I'm still pretty shy. I was like, I can't talk to this man, look this is Cesar Chavez, and here's me. later on, I would not run into him, I saw him at a dinner, and I went up and said, I was at the day you dedicated the 40 acres. And we actually had a conversation, and I felt much, much better talking about what I felt the movement or the great boycott had done to me. I did at that time tell him I admired him, but the first time. But the second time, I was much more open and honest. I worked as a teacher's aide at Logan Elementary School, and that meant I was working with parents. Usually I was the translator, so I would go to the meetings. I had no idea what welfare rights meant, but they needed a translator, and they would say, and I have to try to say it in my head to English, will you go with us, Miss Garcia? And I said, oh yeah, I'll go. And so this is how I became involved with the parents in the community. Most of the people I went to school with were involved in San Diego State, but my involvement came with the parents. At that time, a new organization was being formed. We were meeting at the State Service Center, and every Latino organization in town would send a representative. And the idea was that at one point, every organization would have a rep, and there would be a new organization. And after arguing on what the organization would be called, because let me tell you, I don't care what organization you're forming, there is going to be arguing. So I have no problem putting it out there. Yes, we argued about what name, and I can't remember all the different names. But in the end, the name became Chicano Federation. And the first chair of the federation was Assemblyman Pete Chacon. That board was appointed. Then after that, there was an elected board. I was on the elected board. And basically, the reason they appointed me to the elected board was they said, we need a student. Well, Maria's a student, she can do it. Okay, but it was a learning experience. And again, we were working everywhere. We went to the mayor's office, the city council, things that I didn't know. That was how power was formed. It was very important to learn that. I believe the Federation would not be where it is today if it weren't for the picket lines, the lawsuits, and the everyday tenacity of people. I hope it will always be an advocacy group for the community. One of my dreams for the Fed is that whenever they want an opinion on the Latino community, they call the director of the Federation. Nancy, by the way, has been very good about giving out statements and stuff. I think the board's a little conservative. That's my opinion. I don't expect you to say anything. But, yeah, no, that's true, not everyone. But when you weigh the weight, that scale goes down on this conservative side, okay? I was asked why I wrote the book, but I want Nancy to talk about the Federation before I get into the reasons for writing the book. So I'm going to give the floor over to Nancy.
Thank you, Maria. And I'll just warn you, I'm nowhere near as interesting, so I'll keep it short. But, you know, a friend of mine once talked to me about the way that we introduce ourselves, right? And we usually will say what my name is and what I do. And she pointed out how we're so much more than that, right? And challenged us, actually, she came to the Federation and challenged all of us to introduce ourselves by telling a little bit about ourselves, right? Because we're so much more than just our titles. So allow me to reintroduce myself. Yes, my name is Nancy Maldonado. I am the very, very proud daughter of immigrant parents, Jesus and Esperanza Maldonado from Chihuahua. I am the annoyingly, obnoxiously proud mom of Dominic, who is 8 years old and just the light of my life. And I have the honor of leading the Chicano Federation team, who's just an incredible group of passionate, dedicated people. And I have the privilege of working with the 25,000 families that we work with each year and doing my little part to help make San Diego a place where all of them feel like they belong and a place where everyone can thrive. So that's who I am. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Bishop, California, tiny, tiny little town. If you know where that is, good for you. People really are from there. And I was the daughter. My parents were farm workers, and I grew up on a farm and in this tiny little town. So, you know, it's interesting when Maria talks about when she first experienced racism. I can't really pinpoint when I first experienced racism because there was so much that I grew up with that I felt was just normal. And so if I go back and think of like, oh wait, that wasn't normal. Being followed around a store isn't normal. But at the time, that was just the way that we lived, right? Getting, when people point out, oh, that's weird that you speak English so well, right? That was normal. So yeah, I don't know when I first experienced racism. I know when I first started noticing that, wait, that's not right. You don't treat other people like that. You don't ask other people those questions. And it wasn't until I was a lot older. Because culturally, we do grow up. I grew up with parents that were from the generation of you just put your head down, you don't ask questions, you don't make noise. And if it wasn't for people like Maria and some of you in this room who did make noise, I wouldn't have the opportunity to be where I am today and say the things that I'm able to say and be in the position that I'm able to say. So, it's funny, when I first came to Chicano Federation and was kind of in the running for the CEO position, Maria called me and said, I don't know you. So I know you can't imagine her really saying that, right? And she said, so we need to talk. And we did. And we sat and we talked, and she said, I want to learn about you, and I want to make sure that you are the person that is going to take Chicano Federation back to its roots. Because so many people like Maria had done so much work to build that organization, to have an advocacy organization, and it meant a lot to her to bring that back. And it's women like Maria, I mean, yes, men too, but I'm a little partial to women. And their stories and their struggles and hearing from them, the work that they had to do so that I can be in the position that I'm in, that I hope that we never lose sight of. And that's why, Maria's book and her stories are so important. And I do feel a great sense of responsibility to make sure that we carry this work forward in everything that we do. And I also, talking about education, feel a very big sense of responsibility to make sure that my son doesn't think that the history that he learns in schools is our history. Our history's in books like that, and that's what needs to be told. And I feel a responsibility as a parent to make sure that he knows those stories that are oftentimes forgotten and left out, so that we don't ever repeat where we've been. And I, thinking about kind of what I wanted to share with you today, is the question around equity, right? We hear that word a lot. And I'll pass it back over to Maria so she can talk about her book, but something that I would like for all of us to think about, and I'll close out with at the end, is what does equity look like? What would an equitable society look like? What would an equitable San Diego look like to all of us? And it's not until we really stop and think about that we can think about the changes that we need to make and how much more work there is to be done. And so I'll turn it back over to Maria so she can talk about this important book and why it was so special to be interviewed by her. And I'll share with you, if you've read the book, I don't talk about my personal life very often. This woman has an amazing way of getting people to talk about things that I never thought I would talk about in public, but she has a gift and a skill. So if you haven't read the book, I really encourage you to pick it up and read through it, because it's really important, and it shares the stories of so many amazing people who contributed to San Diego who you might not otherwise have known. So I'll turn it back over to Maria, and then, hopefully at the end we can have a little bit of dialogue about what does equity look like and how much more work we have to do to get there.
Thank you. I'm going to start by talking about the book cover. And if you notice, there's various places. Lemon Grove, Barrio Logan, Encanto, where I grew up, but there's a place called Eden Gardens. People do not know that we are all over San Diego. We're not in Barrio Logan. We're not in Logan Heights. We're not in just National City. We are everywhere. And so I wanted people to ask the question, well, why did you include Lakeside, or why did you include El Cajon? By the way, there is a large Latino now. There wasn't when I was growing up, but there is a large Latino population in Lemon Grove. I did quite a bit of studying on Eden Gardens, and I kind of tripped into Eden Gardens, okay? I went up there for the purpose of finding out where Max Hernandez, who was the first elected chairman of the Chicano Federation, grew up, because he always said, I grew up in North County. well, North County is forever, so I wasn't sure. And then we narrowed it down to he grew up in Eden Gardens. So I went up there, and all of a sudden, there's names like Hernandez, Costa, all these Spanish names on these streets in this little community. And I had to find out more about the community. Lucky for me, there was a young lady who was willing to share. Actually, she was willing to share, but she was willing to bring a group together. Before there was an Interstate 5, this is what Eden Garden looked like. Where is Eden Garden? It's about 3 miles from the beach in Solana Beach, and about actually less than a half a mile from the Del Mar racetrack. How did it happen that they wanted? Well, they needed workers for the fruit fields, for the avocados. And again, no Interstate 5, so it went all the way. This was all there. And of course, you couldn't have all those Mexicans living in Solana Beach, so you had to put them somewhere. And so they put them in what is now called Eden Gardens. You still have a large Mexican-American population because all the restaurants and the hotels and the different places around there need a place for the workers. But you also have people that have been there since 1939. Oops, went the wrong way. Okay. Wow. This is Teresa and Ray Rincon in front of a 100-year-old tree in the patio of Tony's Jacal. Teresa's father was the one who opened Tony's Jacal, and it was a little bit different than what you see today. I'm still having trouble. Come on. Why won't it? This is the original Tony's Jacal. It was at the Palomar Airport. They started it because Tony's wife needed a place to work because she had been working as a maid or a housekeeper in Rancho Santa Fe, that whole area. It was there, but then when she had her first child, it was decided, no, this is not a good place for her to be away from home. So they went back to what is now Tony's Jacal, but at that time it was their home. This is Tony, and he as you can see, he's not real light skinned, he's dark. So people would come into the restaurant and go, who is that guy? He thinks he owns the place. And the bartender would say, he does own the place. Okay. Ray, which I'm going to show this picture because I just love it because it shows Teresa and Ray at a young age. Ray married Teresa, but when he was the bartender, he gets a call, and he had a very strict rule. We don't play favorites. If you come here, you wait in line like everybody else. So he gets this call and says, J. Edgar Hoover is coming to the restaurant. Ray had no idea who J. Edgar Hoover was at that time. So he said, okay, fine. And then walks J. Edgar Hoover with his entourage of all these FBI agents. And so he kind of thought, well, this guy must be pretty important, with all these people. But he also had to wait like everybody else. And that didn't go over too big. So Hoover would then send someone to stand in line that would call and say, okay, we're about 3 people away, you can come now. Remembering that a lot of their business came from the Del Mar racetrack. And you had movie stars coming constantly. They had for a while a chair known as the Elizabeth Taylor chair. And when Desi Arnaz moved to that area, he was an avid racehorse fanatic. He was past just liking to go to the races. He loved the races. And his kids grew up in Tony's Jacal. They played in the patio, they did all of this. Today, that's Tony's Jacal. By the way, I recommend the food, especially the ceviche. They've done a lot of sponsoring of community events. They sponsored a Little League team that went to the playoffs in '57. And this past year, and I'm not giving a commercial, I don't want you to know that I do not get paid for talking about this place. This past year, they gave to the people that were working with COVID patients, they had them come in for lunch, the fire department and the police department. So free dinner. Okay, so This is Simona Gonzalez Montes before her marriage. This is her family. Her dad worked for the railroad, so she was everywhere. The railroad would send him. Now she talks about the Santa Fe Railroad Station, and she said, I heard a lot of yelling at a baseball park there, but I never went over there to see what they were doing. It was Lane Field, and for those of you who have lived in San Diego, you know what Lane Field was, the baseball field at that time. They also lived, and I want you to use your imagination, where 54th, Torrey Pines Road, and 5 all meet, there's a canyon there. And in that canyon, they had their home. During World War II, and World War II San Diego was really primed for war. Everybody just knew that somehow the Japanese were going to invade San Diego, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But they also had the servicemen coming on the train. Notice this is their yard, and there's Simona with a basket. They had a victory garden, and her dad won the victory garden contest with the Santa Fe Railroad. To me, more important than that is the soldiers would pass on the train, and her father insisted that they make sandwiches for them. And so when they would hear the train whistle way down, they'd rush and make the sandwiches, put them on a tray, and then they would stand kind of on that little ramp, or not ramp, but the little gully area, hold the tray above their head, and the soldiers would reach out the window and get their sandwiches. Okay? So they were doing patriotic things long before others. This is Simona and her little brother. When they moved up north to around it's around LA, but a little bit above LA with the railroad, she was very excited. She was, I think 13 or 14 years old. And like most 13 and 14-year-old girls, she was really excited about this new move and about the fact that her dad was, the boss of this crew and all of this. And the railroad did move them. They put them in a boxcar with the cows, the kids, and the furniture. So everything was in this boxcar when they get to the new location, thinking that she was going to be able to kind of, be a little bit presumida. They opened the boxcar, and the first thing out of there was the cows. So there wasn't any great moment of triumph. I want to say a little bit about Simona. This is her graduation picture. And they went to what is called the American School, both her and Ray. The American School, the official reason for having an American school was to teach ESL, to teach English as a second language to the students. The real reason for having the American school was to segregate the kids. Didn't want all those Mexican kids down in that Solana Beach area, so they had their own school. And I'm going to just show a couple of pictures of the kids. You can see all little Chicanito kids. Okay. Real quick, I'm going to show you, this is the group of women who met and told the stories. And then they said, oh, and you have to talk to so-and-so, and you have to talk to so-and-so. That's how the chapter on Eden Gardens snowballed. This is St. Leo's Mission. Was a church built by the community, and Sunday Mass was a big deal. You'd go to Sunday Mass, and then you'd go to your grandmother's house and have music and dancing and tortillas and all this good food, and it was a tradition. You could even at times hear the concerts from the Del Mar racetrack. So if you sat on the steps outside, you got to enjoy the concert without actually being there. Well, the diocese decided to close the church because they wanted the money from having one church and not being divided. This was the first wedding that took place in that church. But this lady led the effort to keep the church in Solana Beach. It wasn't her by herself, of course. She had other people that worked with her, and they sent petitions, and they sent letters, and they did all of this. However, the diocese said, no, we're going to close the church. And she did something that I can't even imagine. She wrote the Vatican and asked that the church not be closed. And she won. They made it a mission. So you can't close a mission. It's not one of the original missions, so I want to make sure that's understood. But it was a mission, and therefore it's still there. Lots of things happen in that little church, in that community. That's the man who owned El Jacal at the time. He donated the land for the kitchen. I think we need to talk a little bit about Pottery Canyon. How many of you have heard about Pottery Canyon? Okay, two couple. Okay, there's a few. If you blink your eyes, it's your turn to go up Torrey Pines Road, you miss Pottery Canyon. The Rodriguez brothers from New Mexico came, and they had a business making pottery, but making mostly the tiles for the roof. The church in La Jolla, the Star of, I want to say Star of Indian, that's not the church, Star of the Sea, those tiles came from there. When they redid the mission, those tiles came from there. And they did very, very well. You know, some of them even bought property in La Jolla. However, as people start, well, let me show you the kill. This is the parts of the Rodriguez family. This is what's left of Pottery Canyon. It's the kill. My friend Dennis Doyle and I went looking for the foundation because I had a feeling that there had to be something there. So, and Dennis is much more adventurous than my partner Jose, so he was willing to go down there with me, and we moved weeds and we moved branches and we did this and that. We never found any trace of the foundation. What we did find is when you're at the bottom of the canyon and you look up, there's these very large, beautiful homes. Beautiful, no question about it. Well, you couldn't have those beautiful homes up there looking down at this old nasty people working in the canyon. So they took them to court. It went on and on for a while, but eventually it was ruled that the people in the canyon would have to leave. I'm hoping that they'll save the kill for future, and the La Jolla Historical Society is working on that. My feeling about fences kind of run with Dennis. If they really wanted you to stay out, they'd put a lock. But if it's just a closed gate, they really are inviting you to come in and take a picture. So Dennis jumped the fence and took this picture. So we have a very good picture of the kill. This is Tina Real. Tina was a talent agent, and she ran this agent for people. When the Simon & Simon was filmed in San Diego, part of the people were through Tina's agency. Tina has long roots in San Diego. Her family was here. And I want to show this Caliente sign. She worked for the Caliente racetrack. Her office, or her place, was at the U.S. Grant. But she had an opportunity to view various things. And by the way, what I call my presentations are teasers. I tell you just a little bit, hoping you'll be so interested that you'll buy the book. Okay, do these ladies look like spies? Look at them, nice little señoritas. However, this is what they were. They were spies. They were in what used to be the bank, now it's the Marriott downtown. They were in the basement, and their job was to monitor phone calls between Mexico and the U.S. Now remember again, the whole thing was that they just knew the Japanese were going to invade through Mexico. They were very discreet and kept the stories quite to themselves. And probably the most interesting thing they ever shared with anybody was that John Wayne was having an affair with some lady in Mexico. Okay, the S kind of, so I know they had to have picked up more than that, but it was never shared. This is now the courtyard by Marriott. A friend and I were walking, and I went to make an appointment because I wanted to go into that basement. Again, hoping I could find just something. Of course, it's been remodeled 7 million times, but I still have this little hope. So I went and said, I'd like to make an appointment to come back and have a tour of the building. And they said, well, we're not busy right now. So we did a tour, and they took us to the basement. We saw the bank vaults. We went to the roof. The view's amazing, but I didn't find anything that related back to the spies. I think in my heart of hearts, I knew I wasn't going to, but the hope springs eternal, and I kept hoping we would find something. The women that were here also trained the women in the Imperial Valley to do the same thing, to monitor the phone calls between Mexicali, or Mexico period, and the Imperial Valley. This is the breaking ground at Chicano Park, and the lady in the white sweater holding a purse, that's me. Okay. Oh. Yeah, everybody in the world says they were at Chicano Park. They're 10 years old. They couldn't have been there, but but they like to say they were there. If you're going to go look at Chicano Park and the murals, I recommend that you make an appointment through the Chicano Park Steering Committee and let them give you a guided tour, because there's so much in those murals and so much to see. And my favorite mural, probably because I love history, is the historical mural. There's other beautiful, beautiful murals, but that's my favorite. This is a fountain that's also at Chicano Park. When you see the Barrio Logan sign, how many of you have actually seen that sign? How many of you have gotten out of the car and read about that sign? Okay, a couple. There is a whole, by the way, the artist was Armando Nunez. There's a whole explanation about the sign, about what the corn means, but you've got to get out of the car and read. Okay, so, but I promise you it's worth the time. How am I doing for time?
About 12:15.
Okay, I'll take about another 5. This is Albert Buñuelos, and in the book I share people that we lost and people that came back different. Well, everybody came back different after Vietnam. People that really changed their life for the better, which is really rare after going to Vietnam. Albert Buñuelos, to my knowledge, is the first Latino from San Diego killed in Vietnam. Well, actually, I grew up with his brothers. We went to Morris together. Okay, and he was in Vietnam, almost ready to come home, and he was killed. When his wife got the message that he had died, actually, when she saw the 2 officers standing there, she was so sure that they were coming to tell her that he was wounded. Never, ever crossed her mind that he had died. And a lot of us were very naive about Vietnam. I'll share a story later. So she went, how is he, where is he, blah, blah. And they said, the famous, we regret to inform you. And then she had the job, along with the 2 officers, to go and inform his mother. One thing that was common throughout this story was the moms. The moms suffered tremendously. Some spent the day in church praying novena after novena that their sons would come back. Some wrote the president about the war. Every one of them, Billy's mom and dad, they were so proud that he was serving in the service. His dad had been in World War II and had experienced. But I'm drawing a blank when you flash back on the war and things that happened. Yeah, PTS. And he always felt that the government hadn't done enough for the guys who came back from World War II. In fairness to the government, what did we know about what was going on at that time, or what the suffering or the mental issue? Billy went, and he was wounded, not severely actually, but he kept having flashbacks, and he kept having terrible headaches because it grazed his head. When he returned, he went to the Veterans Hospital, where they gave him pain pills and uppers, and as a result, he became addicted to the pills. Also, his official reason for passing away was a heroin overdose. But his mother always felt that if he had never been given that medication, if he had never been exposed to all that, he would not have become a heroin addict. The other part was that, to me, was very sad. Robert said he never saw his mother smile after his brother died. And that kind of happened over and over and over again. This is Nick Hernandez. Nick has passed away, but when his first night in Vietnam, he was wounded. Another incident came when there was a bomb, and one of his fellow companions got so scared and went into shock that he didn't duck. He just stood there. And so Nick went and pulled him down to the ground, and at that point, that's when the bomb hit. One guy died, Nick saved that other guy, and Nick was okay as you can be when a bomb goes off in front of you. Nick and Connie lost a son to leukemia, and they were part of the group that started the McDonald House. This is Memo, another person who has passed recently. Memo passed away. It'll be a year in October, or the first day of September. Either the first day of October, first day of September. Memo was a photographer well known in the community. He took pictures of every function in our community. He actually could write or could have done a history picture book. He was in Vietnam, and his girlfriend here had started talking marriage. And Memo got the biggest case of cold feet you ever saw. And he decided maybe the war would be better. So he enlisted in the Air Force. And thinking, oh, the Air Force, it won't be as dangerous as being in combat every day. They were working on a plane in Vietnam, him and a buddy, Frank Macias, when they started bombing the area. So he told Frank, we got to get out of the plane. And they got out of the plane, and they heard somebody yell, stop, who's going there? And Memo came back with a choice 4-letter word, letting him know. And the guy said, well, I knew when I heard what you said that you had to be an American. Tells you a lot about our fate. Memo was wounded, but so was his friend. His friend had a hole in his back that Memo could stuff socks in to stop the bleeding. They went into the bunker, which the Viet Cong then came through. Memo put the guy on top of him because, of course, he was in tremendous pain. He was moaning. And then Memo put his arms around the guy and around his mouth so you wouldn't hear him, holding him very tight so you wouldn't hear him moaning. The Viet Cong came in, and Memo said they were standing right next to them, and they didn't realize they were alive. They said they were all dead. Okay? Memo got a purple. Memo, who most people did not know, had 2 Purple Hearts. Okay. David Valladolid, many of you know David. David was going to Mesa College, and this is the last person I'm going to talk, well, one more person after this, was going to Mesa College, and he wrote a paper, and the instructor decided that he had not written the paper, so he gave him an F. So then David had shared this paper with everybody and had said, oh, it's a great paper. Oh, yeah, you're going to get an A. And so when the paper came back with an F, he was disheartened and shocked. So he told the teacher, what's wrong with this? She said, well, I know you didn't write it. And he assured her he had written it. By the way, the same thing happened. This is not a news story. Same thing happened to Roger Cáceres at Southwestern. He was told, you didn't write that paper. So anyway, David said to her, if I don't maintain my grade point average, I'm going to be sent to Vietnam. She kind of went, oh, well, type of thing. Instead of appealing it, which is what now we would have enough sense to do, but then we didn't, he just quit going to class. So he ended up flunking out of Mesa, and his next stop was Vietnam. David was in constant communication with his mother, who I dearly loved. She was one of my neighbors. They were writing back and forth all the time. Then one day, the letters quit coming. David had experienced a bomb, and the bomb was so strong that it took his eyes and put them on the cheeks. When that was over, David was blind. And so his mother, worrying about why she hadn't heard from him, went to the priest over at St. John the Evangelist. And the priest called Red Cross. Red Cross came, and they said, this big general type person, you need to write your mother. And David said, I can't. Well, David did talk to the priest, never telling him he was blind. Just saying, yeah, I'm going to get back. I am going to write my mom back on it, trying to soothe things over. He had 2 operations, and they told him, you're never going to see again. Quit, Another doctor came in and said, we can do 1 more operation with no promises. David said, what do I have to lose? they did the operation, and he was able to see after that operation. The last person, and there's tons of people to talk about. The book's 400 pages, okay, so there's a whole lot of stories like this. The last person I'm going to talk about is Frank Peralta. Frank became a deputy sheriff, but in school, he was the biggest screw-up you ever saw in your life. At Our Lady of Guadalupe, he was constantly in trouble and made to stand outside. The last thing was, he was at Lincoln, got into a fight, and they said, "You're out of here." They sent him to Snyder. And those of us who grew up in San Diego remember, you did not want to go to Snyder. That was where bad boys went, you know, or girls had gotten themselves pregnant. And so it was so different. So he went his first day at Snyder. He said the teacher had no control. The kids were jumping up and down. He left class and went to the recruiter's office and signed up for the Navy. Then he went to training and all this. Next thing you know, the ship is being sent to Vietnam. So he calls his dad and announces, "I'm going to Vietnam." And his dad said, "There's a war there." Frank had no idea that there was a war. And he said, "Oh." And he said, "It's not, you really don't want to go there." Well, it was too late. He went, he served his time there, and Vietnam transformed him. He started reading books. He started studying. It was a complete change. And I use Frank because most of us had very negative experiences in Vietnam. And for him, it turned his world completely around. I have a lot more things to share, but I'm going to stop in the interest of time. And both Nancy and I will take questions. Thank you guys for being so attentive.
I'm not sure how long Nancy can stay, so I'm going to have her say a little to us about the Chicano Federation and her thoughts about advocacy currently in San Diego.
Sure, so I'll keep it quick. So, I think the kind of the tie-in with Maria's book and the people that she talks about are so many of these people participated in the formation of Chicano Federation and getting it to the advocacy organization that it was. And I love hearing all of their stories because at one point or another, I've read about those people or their names have come up. And so that's why it's so meaningful. Chicano Federation's been around for almost 53 years. And it's because of the people in Maria's book and the people that she talked about that it's even here and continues to exist. And so, yes, it is probably it is the leading advocacy organization, particularly for Latinos here in San Diego County. And I think one of the things that all of the work of the people who came before me empowered me to do is to always do the right thing. And that's not always going to be the popular thing. To always say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, regardless of what is, the popular thing to do or the politically correct thing to do. And if it wasn't for people like Maria and everyone in that book, I don't think that I'd have the courage, the strength, or the opportunity to do these things. So, as we sit here in San Diego County now, and when I think about what equity looks like and where we all have to be, I hope that one day there is no more firsts. There is no more first Latina this or first Latino this, right? That's just normal because as you can see, we've been here forever. In fact, we're indigenous to San Diego, we're indigenous to California, and yet we still have firsts. And that's a shame. And the other piece that I hope that we see one day is that these stories and Maria's books are not separate, but that they are the history that our children, particularly here in San Diego County, are learning because this is our history. This is the history of San Diego. And the fact that someone had to make a separate book for these stories to be told is a shame. And so when I think about two pieces of what would equity look like in this county, I think those are really important pieces. And I applaud Maria, who is a walking wealth of knowledge, and hope that we can all continue to learn from people like Maria, but that we can all continue to do the right thing. And I hope that also one day that saying the things that we say at Chicano Federation, that they're not considered bold, that they're not considered like, oh, wow, she's taking a risk, that we're just telling the truth because that is the truth that needs to be told. And it's not bold, it's just what needs to be done. And, thank you to people who have empowered me, who have supported me, and who continue to support the work of Chicano Federation, but we have a lot more work to do.
So I could see there are a few questions, and I had some too, just about the Chicano Federation accomplishments and advocacy issues currently. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes. Yeah, so when it comes to, we still continue to have a lot of the programs that we have because programs are important, but we also understand, and we're one of the few organizations that really understand that programs alone will not move the needle. Programs without advocacy, without policy, and without really kind of driving those two at the same time are not going to change the landscape for our families. So at Chicano Federation, we mostly serve families who are considered low income, and we do that through a variety of different programs: affordable housing, nutrition, childcare. We help women to start their own businesses, but we do a lot of civic engagement. So obviously voting is a huge issue and will continue to be a huge issue, and getting our communities registered to vote, getting them to vote in every election, not just presidential elections. That's going to continue to be a huge effort for us. We were really involved in census and trying to get people to participate in the census. Redistricting is something that we're working very intensely on, and making sure that our community is engaged in understanding what redistricting is, but the impact that it could have on their lives for years to come. And definitely Maria can talk a little bit about the role that Chicano Federation played in redistricting many, many years ago. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that a lot of the issues that around why Chicano Federation was formed, police brutality, voting rights, those are all still issues that we are still fighting today, and that we're still making sure that we have access to and equitable access, and that our communities are aware and know how to speak for these policies that are going to impact their lives. So any issue that comes up that affects our people, we are there, we're making a statement, but I think a big part of what we're trying to do is engage our community members, because that's where the power is. We have so much power in numbers, and I don't think that we've leveraged that to the way that we can. And I do think that, especially during the Chicano movement, that was the power in it, right? Is that you had so many people that were coming out, that were coming together around these causes. And I have a vision and a dream of seeing our community rise up and do that again, because we do have power in numbers. And I don't know if you want to share anything. Okay.
But there is the power in numbers. When we would show up at a city council meeting and pack the office, they would listen. They don't listen when one or two people show up.
Yes, and the recent census says that 34% of San Diego County is, I don't want to use the word Hispanic, but Latino. It is San Diego.
And we know that's a huge undercount. We know that is not reflective of the real numbers. So,
could you say a word about the impact of COVID on the Latino community and policies that you think have made a difference?
Yeah, so, I'm sure we're all tired of talking about COVID, but when COVID first struck, we saw the numbers instantly of how it was affecting particularly Latinos here in San Diego County. Higher rates of infection, higher death, and nothing was being done. And that's where we went to work, and we started screaming from the rooftops that you need to listen, because our people are getting sick and they're dying. And there was a lot of really contentious moments with our elected officials where we were calling them out in a very public way. And again, you have to do the right thing, not the popular thing. And there's moments, there's a couple of my team members here, where I would have some of our elected officials texting me at night, like, will you shut up? And the answer was no, I won't. And so what happened is that they did put a lot of money into forming to making sure that we had the resources, that we put testing in these communities, that we were educating people, we were giving priority to vaccinations, we were giving those appointments to people who needed the most. But it didn't just happen overnight, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't painless. But that, I think what that showed me is that sometimes, again, you have to just be loud and be vocal and be relentless in order for something to happen. And I'm so proud to say that San Diego County has one of the highest vaccination rates among Latinos, and that didn't happen by accident. Anything to say about COVID?
I've had enough about COVID.
Yes, yes. Systemic racism and education are hot topics these days. Do you feel that San Diego has been addressing these issues appropriately in the school system, with ethnic studies, or what do you think needs to improve in education in San Diego along these lines? Tough question.
I'll answer the first
You're a
question.
tough
Do I
lady.
think it's been has it been addressed appropriately? No.
I agree. Ethnic studies is fighting its way to the top, but it's not there yet. Notice, there's always this controversy. The fact that people are willing to say, we should live that's the past. We should forget about it. Let's start new. Well, you can't start new if you don't know of the past. And so I think education has failed us miserably, and that's coming from an educator.
I also will add that I think nonprofits play a very, very important role in kind of delivering these services and advocacy. But I do think, and I've been very vocal about this, so it's nothing new, that nonprofits in San Diego need to reconsider their priorities sometimes, and that if we get so lost chasing the money, we will forget that we are here to fight for change, not for money. And again, that's not the popular opinion, but we need to remember that everything that we do should be in what's best for our communities, not what's going to get us the next grant.
You're in trouble.
One more topic. You're a strong lady, so you can handle all this, I think. What policies in the city and the state do you think are helping undocumented residents the most? Do you have any comment on that? I know the League has a very strong immigration committee, thanks to Beryl Flom, and I think we all dream for a path to citizenship, but it's so difficult with Congress. But what can we be doing more of locally, or what do you think has been done locally that is positive?
Go ahead. You're going to have to leave, so I want you to talk more.
Well, so, immigration is such a hot topic, and I get that there's no easy solution, but I will say this. I think that what we need to be doing and what we can be doing is prioritizing children, because children are not to blame in any of this. And part of the problem is that immigration has become so politically charged that we lose sight that these are human beings and these are babies, these are children. So if I had one wish, I would say, let's take care of the children. Let's reunite them, particularly with the children who have families here in the United States who are willing to take them. Why is it taking so long to reunify these children? I think if we could just even start with that, it would make a huge difference. And I get there's no easy solution and there's no one size fits all, but one of the things that I think I've been a little disheartened by is, during the previous administration when this all came to light and everybody was outraged, even though this has been happening for, unfortunately for a really long time, I was hoping that the veil had been lifted and that we would never go back. That was my hope, right? Like, people know now, people can see it, right? We're not going to go back. And it feels like people thought, oh gosh, this is too scary. Like, we don't even know what to do. Let's just pretend it's not happening. And I want everybody to know that all of that is still happening. It is happening with this administration. It is happening just as much as it was before. And awareness is the first step. We need to know that this is continuing to happen, and unless that we are all vocal and we all continue to be outraged by it, is going to continue to happen. But my one wish is that we would take care of the children and reunify them with the children who have families in the United States who are willing to take them right now.
The one comment that bothers me is they need to get in line. There is no line. And that's what people do not understand. There is no line to get into. So that bothers me. And of course, the news stories on yesterday with the Haitians coming in Texas, that was horrible. It was shocking to see them being roped and hit. I'm still naive enough to think that as a country we are better than that. And unfortunately, when you see it, you realize we are not better than that. That's part of our history, our culture, if you will.
Thank you. Big important subjects. Could you say a little bit on what the particular challenges are for women Latina activists in San Diego, past and present?
I'll just really quickly, because I think this is maybe something that, like a conversation that I've had with other women around my age, is that we're not enough of either. I'm not Latina enough, but yet I'm not American enough. And so where do I fit in, right? And that's one of the challenges that we face is the not being enough of either. And it's an interesting place to be and an interesting space to navigate.
I think in the early years of the movement, the guys had it, they were the only ones who wanted to speak. Or no, they didn't only want to speak, they wanted the women not to speak. And you've seen a real change. We now have Latinas that are elected to office. We have 3 mayors, and yes, thank you. Not that I had anything to do with it, but we have 3 women that are mayors. And I give Mary Salas a lot of credit because it took a lot of bravery to run for office. She, that door opened this much and she had to kick it open the rest of the way. And then Alejandra followed. And then Esther. I think that's very, very important. So the change I've seen is that I think the men finally are showing more respect for the women. I'm sure behind closed doors there's less than kind comments made. But you have seen a change. We're seeing women in the workforce more. And of course, the purse and the money gives you more power as well.
Could you tell us a little more about the women who are mayors? Just maybe a little more of the story of how they got there and what the challenges were.
What the challenges are. Alejandra is my favorite story because in 5th grade she wrote an essay that and when they asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? Her response was, mayor of National City. Okay, and 5th grade. And when she was sworn in, her 5th grade teacher is the person who swore her in. To me, that was so meaningful. Yeah. And then Esther, God love her, she's up in North County. Oceanside.
What city is she in?
Oceanside.
Oh.
Okay. You know that community is not the easiest community to run for office. So, and you always find somebody questioning why she did this and questioning her comments. I think that's one of the things Latinas face. Why did you say that? First of all, half of the time they wouldn't ask a male. Okay. And then the fact that you're Latina. And Mary is a retiree, but as I said earlier, she opened doors, and she's got a lot of static back. I think that was almost like, she's going to play at being mayor, and she'll get tired of it and leave and not do anything. She has done a lot. The one thing I see all 3 of them doing is pulling others along. So, and I think that's one of the big things. We have to support each other. I don't believe in all these. Like when people say, I want to write a book, I think that's wonderful. It's not competition. There's enough history for everybody. The same thing with running for political office. There's enough offices where we should be found everywhere. So that's one of my I really commend these ladies for taking that job.
Let me see, there's a couple more here. Were there any key figures or key moments in the history of the Chicano Federation? Sort of, I believe there were some lawsuits or moments around Prop 187 that I think maybe worth commenting on.
I have to say, I don't think we filed enough lawsuits now, because until the consent decree came along, the county wasn't running to hire Latino employees. You have to really have the law behind you, because otherwise there's an excuse, oh, we can't find any qualified, oh, they really didn't want to do this. There's 100 reasons not to do it, and the reasons to do it are less and less. So I really believe that if we don't file lawsuits, if we don't point things out, I don't like this nicey-nicey, oh, it's so good, we have one person here and one person, isn't that nice? No, look at our population, we should have more than one person represent us. So I believe that until we file lawsuits, people are not going to pay attention.
Can you say anything about legal advocacy that the Chicano Federation has done recently?
Well, we haven't filed any lawsuits.
Well, it's time. It is time.
But I believe there was, having read the book, I believe that there were lawsuits around Prop 187 and
Yes.
Prop 227.
Yes.
You joined with others for those, isn't that correct? And
Yes.
then also the consent decree and district elections.
District
was
elections
also
were a biggie.
yeah.
The one,
Here, back to me, Maria. I'm just trying to bring out the story.
187 and 227 lawsuits were filed immediately. What I love about those two were that people went, oh my God, they are not really that supportive as I thought they were. And it to me, it woke up those people who thought, quote, we had made it. The Californians together filed a lawsuit right away. And we should be doing that.
I believe Nancy needs to go, and thank you so much
you.
for being with us,
Of
and we
course.
look forward to staying connected.
Thank you everyone.
Maria, it does have books available if anybody would like to purchase one. They're also available on Amazon. And, I keep mine, I read it a little at a time. It's incredible history. So thank you, Maria.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you to everyone. We're going to try to do more in-person events. It really is nice. I hope people have a chance to just mix with each other, too. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.